Robert McCall wakes up early to get ready for his job at Home Mart. He works hard and has earned respect from his coworkers. They like him and often speak well of him. During lunch, he sits with his friend Ralphie, who is eating a sandwich. When Ralphie takes a bite, Robert hears a loud crunch. He realizes that Ralphie has put chips inside the sandwich. Ralphie has an important exam coming up in a week to qualify for a security guard position. Robert reminds him about the need to lose weight to pass the test. He speaks calmly but firmly and tries to encourage Ralphie to stay focused on his goal. After finishing work for the day, Robert heads home. The apartment is quiet, and he spends some time reading a book. The silence begins to weigh on him, making him feel lonely. To clear his mind, he decides to visit a restaurant near his apartment. He takes the book with him, planning to continue reading there. When Robert settles at his table, a girl sitting nearby starts a conversation with him. She asks if the man in his book has caught the fish yet. Robert looks up from his book and replies that the man hasn't even thrown the bait yet. The girl listens with interest and then tells Robert about a device she recently bought to help her make songs. She sounds excited and proud as she explains her plans. Robert smiles and tells her that he believes she is very talented. The girl seems happy to hear this. Before leaving, she asks him to let her know what happens to the fish in the story. The next evening, Robert returns to the restaurant. The same girl is there again. She approaches him and asks about the fish. She wants to know if the man in the book caught it.
Fish.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah, he did.
Robert answers that the man did catch the fish, but a shark ate it. The girl listens carefully, but before the conversation can continue, a car suddenly stops outside the restaurant. The girl's phone rings and she takes the call. A man named Slavi is on the other end. He demands that she leave the restaurant and come to the car immediately. The girl looks nervous and pleads with him to let her stay. Slavi shouts at her, leaving her no choice. She walks out of the restaurant with tears in her eyes. It becomes clear that Slavi is her pimp. She is being forced to follow his orders. The girl gets into the car, where another man is waiting. Robert watches the entire scene from inside the restaurant. He stays quiet but observes every detail carefully. The next day, Robert spends time helping Ralphie with his weight loss efforts. He encourages him to stay consistent and reminds him about the importance of his upcoming test.
8, 7, 6.
Later, Robert goes back to the restaurant. He notices the same girl sitting at a table. She looks tired and has fallen asleep. Robert decides to serve her some food. He quietly places it in front of her and waits for her to wake up. When she opens her eyes, she seems surprised. She looks at him and walks over to sit at his table. Robert notices faint bruises and marks on the girl's face. He learns that her name is Elena. Concerned, he gently asks her what happened. Elena hesitates, but eventually tells him that the man she got into the car with the previous night was the one who hit her. She then hands Robert a CD. It contains songs she has recorded in her voice. Robert looks at the CD for a moment and tells her that she doesn't have to keep doing work she doesn't want to do. He assures her that there are other ways to make a living. Elena sighs and explains that it's not as simple as it sounds. After a pause, she asks Robert about his wife. Robert tells her that he is a widower. He explains that he is trying to finish reading 100 books because it is something his wife used to do. They continue talking for hours, sharing bits of their lives. Later that night, while they are walking outside,
You're very welcome, Alina.
a car pulls up in front of them. Slavi steps out. His cold expression is enough to send a chill down Elena's spine. Without hesitation, he grabs Elena and forces her into the car. She pleads with Robert not to get involved. Before leaving, Slavi hands Robert a business card. He smirks and tells him to call if he ever wants a girl better than this one. Slavi's tone is mocking and his words are cruel. Robert says nothing and watches the car drive away, his face calm but his eyes focused. The next day, Robert returns to the restaurant. He looks around but does not see Elena. A feeling of unease settles over him. One of Elena's friends approaches and tells him that Elena was badly beaten by Slavi and is now in the hospital. The news confirms Robert's worst fear. Robert decides to take action. He visits Slavi and offers him $9,800 in cash. He tells Slavi the money is in exchange for leaving Elena alone. Slavi laughs and mocks him, making it clear he has no intention of agreeing. Robert picks up the money and looks around the room, silently taking in every detail. There are 3 other men in the office, all part of Slavi's gang. Robert steps back toward the door, locks it from the inside, and sets a timer for 16 seconds. What follows is swift and calculated. Robert uses the objects around the room with precision, taking down each of the gang members one by one. When it's over, Slavi is left bleeding from a wound in his neck. Gasping for breath, Slavi mutters that Robert will regret turning down his offer. Robert watches him quietly, as life drains from his eyes. The next day, Robert returns to work. Ralphie approaches him with a smile and hands him a small box of chips. Inside the box is a note with a number on it. It is the weight Ralphie needed to reach for the security guard job. Ralphie proudly tells Robert he made it, and Robert congratulates him with a nod. The news of Slavi and his gang's murder spreads quickly. A mysterious man named Teddy arrives in the city. He steps off a plane and heads straight to the scene of the crime in a black car. When Teddy arrives, he carefully examines the area. He tries to piece together what happened. It becomes clear that he works for Pushkin, a powerful figure who controls Slavi's gang. Pushkin's operations are supported by corrupt policemen. One of them is Frank, who takes orders from Teddy. Teddy instructs Frank to cooperate fully and to provide any information about the murders. His tone is cold and firm, making it clear that failure is not an option. The next day, Robert is at work when he learns that Ralphie has quit his job without explanation. Ralphie had been preparing for his security guard test, so this news surprises Robert. Concerned, Robert goes to see him and finds him helping his mother at her restaurant. Ralphie explains that the restaurant had been damaged in a fire. He believes the fire was caused by an electrical fault, but Robert suspects it was intentional. Robert carefully observes the situation. Ralphie admits that he doesn't want to cause any trouble. He asks Robert to help clean up the restaurant. While working, Robert notices two policemen leaving the place. He realizes they are blackmailing Ralphie's mother and had demanded money from her. When she couldn't pay on time, they burned the restaurant to punish her. After the policemen leave, Robert calmly confronts them. He demands that they return the money they took. He reveals that he has recorded their actions as proof. The policemen refuse and try to take his phone, but Robert quickly overpowers them. He warns them that if they do not return the money to Ralphie's mother, he will release the video and expose their crimes. Meanwhile, Teddy intensifies his efforts to find out who killed Slavi and his gang. He brings Frank with him to meet other criminal groups in the area. Among them is an Irishman named John, who leads a gang. Teddy knows that John and his crew are not involved in the murders. Despite this, he kills John and his entire gang. Teddy uses their deaths as a warning to other gangs, showing them the consequences of stepping out of line. Later, Teddy visits the hospital where Elena's friend is staying. He questions her about Elena's whereabouts, but she denies knowing anything. Teddy doesn't believe her, but he leaves for now. Pushkin calls Teddy and demands to know if he has made progress in finding the person responsible for Slavi's murder. Teddy speaks with Pushkin and informs him that none of the gangs allied with them are responsible for Slavi's murder. He explains that the person behind it is a professional. Teddy assures Pushkin that he will figure out who it is soon. Teddy begins interrogating Elena's friend because he knows she lied to him earlier. He tells her that everyone has said she was the person closest to Elena and must know everything about her. Pressured and afraid, the friend tells Teddy about a man who had come to visit Elena. She gives a detailed description of him. Once Teddy gets the information he needs, he kills her. Meanwhile, the two corrupt policemen return the money they had stolen from Ralphie's mother. Ralphie is finally able to focus on his security guard test. With Robert's help and encouragement, he passes and gets the job he worked so hard for. Teddy continues his investigation and manages to uncover Robert's description. He learns that Robert had entered the casino where Slavi was killed, but no one saw him leave. This raises Teddy's suspicion further. The next day, a man enters Home Mart and threatens one of Robert's co-workers with a gun. He demands money and her ring. Robert gives him the money but cannot intervene directly because there are children in the store. He calmly asks the girl to hand over her ring to the thief. After the robber leaves, Robert silently follows him. Later, the girl finds her ring back at her workplace. It becomes clear that Robert tracked down the thief, killed him, and returned the ring to its rightful owner. Teddy eventually figures out where Robert lives and manages to get inside his apartment. When Robert arrives home, he immediately senses that someone has been there. He opens the door and finds Teddy waiting for him. Teddy introduces himself and claims he is investigating the murder of 5 Russians. Teddy questions Robert,
Oh, yeah, I heard about it on TV. I happened to be there.
asking if he knows anything about the incident. Robert calmly replies that he was at the scene, but only to have dinner with his girlfriend. Teddy then shows him a picture of Elena's murdered friend and asks if he knew her. Robert admits that he knew her a little. Teddy subtly hints that he is responsible for the woman's death and that he knows Robert's description through her. Robert quickly realizes that Teddy is not a policeman because he refuses to show any identification. After leaving his apartment, Teddy becomes more convinced that Robert might be the one who killed Slavi. He orders his men to monitor Robert closely and gather as much information on him as possible. Robert has cameras installed all around his house, allowing him to monitor his surroundings. Teddy grows frustrated and tells his men that all the information they have gathered about Robert is wrong. He orders them to go to Robert's house, capture him, and bring him in for interrogation. Teddy sends someone to approach Robert disguised as a worker from the restaurant. However, Robert quickly realizes the man is not a real worker.
Down there, your hands wouldn't look like that. I know we gotta be waiting for somebody else.
He notices that the man's hands do not match the rough, worn appearance of someone who works in such a job. The man tries to threaten Robert, but Robert acts quickly and kills him. Afterward, Robert cuts the power at the restaurant and steps outside. From across the street, he notices Teddy and Frank sitting in a car, watching the restaurant. Without hesitation, Robert takes out his phone and snaps a picture of them. Teddy realizes he has been spotted and starts pursuing Robert. Robert manages to escape, but during the chase, he confronts another one of Teddy's men. This man turns out to be a corrupt policeman working for Teddy. Robert disarms him, takes his badge and phone, and escapes. However, Robert sustains a gunshot wound to his foot, fired by the man disguised as a restaurant worker earlier. Later, Teddy's gang arrives at Robert's apartment. They search the place but find no sign of him. Meanwhile, Robert is nearby, watching their every move through the cameras he had set up earlier. Teddy senses that Robert is observing them and angrily orders the corrupt policeman working with him to locate Robert. He warns them that if they fail, he will find others who can. In search of more information, Robert visits his friend Susan, who holds an influential position in the government. He shows her the photo he took of Teddy and asks her to help him uncover information about him. Susan agrees and begins investigating. It is revealed that Robert has been living in hiding because his death had been faked in the past. Susan discovers valuable information about Teddy and shares it with Robert. She explains that Teddy works for Pushkin, a powerful figure in the Russian mafia. Pushkin has extensive political connections, making him a dangerous opponent. Susan warns Robert that Teddy is highly intelligent and has a reputation for cruelty. She also provides information about the corrupt policeman working for Teddy, including Frank, who had recently left his post after the events surrounding Robert. Later, Susan confides in her husband that Robert did not come to her for help. Instead, he came to seek her permission to confront the Russian mafia on his own terms. Determined to act, Robert tracks down Frank. He captures him and interrogates him to uncover everything he can about Pushkin and his operations. Frank reveals to Robert the location of a site where Pushkin's illegal money is being collected. Robert decides to act. He takes Frank with him, pretending that Frank is introducing him as one of Pushkin's new men. When they arrive, Robert confidently tells the men at the site that he is taking over the place. In a swift move, Robert disarms one of the gang members and takes control of the situation.
With their hands behind their back, they'll do that, won't they?
He gives the workers the money stored in the building and orders them to leave immediately. Once the workers are gone, Robert ties up all the gang members on site. He then tells Frank to call the police and report what happened. When the police arrive, they arrest Frank and discover all the illegal money stashed at the location. They also find Pushkin's men tied up, unable to resist. Meanwhile, Teddy is at a restaurant, speaking with an associate who claims he will find Robert soon. The man leaves for the bathroom, but moments later, Robert appears and sits across from Teddy. It becomes clear that Robert has already killed the man Teddy was speaking with. Robert calmly tells Teddy to call Pushkin and order him to stop his mission. Teddy refuses, brushing off Robert's demand. Robert begins telling a story about a Russian man who had 5 children and adopted an orphan. The man treated the orphan as his own. But one night, the orphan killed the man and his wife while they were sleeping. Robert adds that this case was never investigated properly and hints that the boy killed them because he feared being abandoned. Robert then addresses Teddy by his real name, Nikolai, revealing that he knows everything about him. The story is a direct accusation. Robert is suggesting that Nikolai himself was the orphan who committed the murders. Nikolai denies feeling any emotions and insists he is not weak. Robert leaves the restaurant, but not before handing Nikolai his phone number. He tells him to call if he decides to cancel the mission. Robert continues his work against Pushkin's operations. Using the information he obtained from Frank's USB drive, Robert uncovers many of Pushkin's illegal activities. He learns about the location of an oil container owned by Pushkin and destroys it, dealing a significant blow to Pushkin's network. Pushkin, furious at the damage, calls Nikolai and orders him to act quickly. Nikolai assures Pushkin that he has assembled a new team and is preparing to eliminate Robert. Nikolai escalates his plans and goes to the place where Robert works. He takes Robert's colleagues hostage to lure Robert out. Nikolai forces Ralphie to speak with Robert. He uses Ralphie as bait, making it clear that they are holding his colleagues hostage. Robert agrees to go to the location, knowing it is a trap. Nikolai tells his men to kill Robert the moment they see him. Despite the heavy security, Robert manages to enter the building unnoticed. Inside the building, Robert plans his next move. He turns on loud music, filling the area with sound. The sudden noise alerts Nikolai's men, who immediately start searching for him. One of the gang members drags Ralphie along, ordering him to show where the sound is coming from. Ralphie tries to stay calm and tells the man that the noise is coming from the security room. When they reach the security room, Robert is hiding in the shadows. The moment is tense, but Robert acts quickly. He ambushes the man with Ralphie and takes him out before he can react. Ralphie is now safe, but the situation is far from over. Robert continues moving through the building. He uses his skills and the environment to eliminate the gang members one by one. Each takedown is deliberate and efficient. The remaining men grow increasingly panicked as their numbers dwindle. By the end, only Nikolai is left. Nikolai, determined to lure Robert into the open, threatens Ralphie directly. He holds him at gunpoint and is hoping to force Robert into a confrontation. Robert stays calm and watches for the right moment. He strikes with perfect timing, killing Nikolai before he can harm Ralphie. With Ralphie safe and the gang neutralized, the immediate threat is over. 3 days later, Pushkin is in his heavily guarded palace in Russia. He is alone taking a shower, unaware of the danger approaching him. Robert has already infiltrated the palace. He observes Pushkin from the shadows and warns him to stay where he is. Pushkin, startled, tries to call for his guards. Robert, however, has already prepared the scene. He left the water running and placed electric wires on the wet floor. When Pushkin steps out of the shower to call for help, he unknowingly triggers the trap. He is electrocuted and dies instantly. Afterward, Robert methodically takes out the guards stationed throughout the palace. Each one falls as he makes his way out. By the time he leaves, Pushkin's network is dismantled, and the final piece of the criminal empire is destroyed. Back home, Robert begins to settle back into his life. He walks with Elena, who has recovered and is in much better health. Elena shares how her life has changed. She says she has started reading books and has found a new job. Her voice is full of hope as she talks about the future. Elena then tells Robert about an envelope she received recently. Inside, there was $9,800 and a plane ticket to another country. She believes the money came from Slavy and his gang, sent to keep her from reporting what happened to the police. She thanks Robert with heartfelt sincerity. Unaware of the truth, she explains that she is ready to start a new life and leave her past behind. In the next part, Robert McCall rides the Turkish railway, calm and composed, with a book in his hands. He is 400 miles away from Istanbul, focused but aware of his surroundings. After finishing a section of the book, he decides to visit the bar cart. There, he joins a Turkish man who has taken his daughter from her American mother, not out of love, but to spite his ex-wife and cause her pain. The Turkish man speaks confidently, but Robert's words reveal his true purpose for being there. The man quickly realizes he is in danger and signals his men to handle Robert. Without hesitation, Robert assesses the room, noting every detail. He activates his timer and begins moving with calculated precision. The men rush to attack, but Robert is faster and far more skilled. He eliminates them one by one, using punches, stabs, and neck snaps to bring them down. After finishing off the last of the attackers, Robert turns his attention to the father. The man is visibly terrified and frozen in his seat. Robert explains the consequences of his actions and leaves him paralyzed by fear, ensuring the man understands the gravity of what he has done. In Boston, Grace walks into her lawyer's office. Her young daughter, who had been taken from her, is waiting inside. Tears stream down Grace's face as she embraces her child. Relief and gratitude flood the room as the two are reunited. Back in his quieter life, Robert works as a Lyft driver. One of his regular passengers is Sam Rubenstein, an elderly man who is searching for his long-lost sister. Robert listens to Sam's stories during their rides, offering silent support and understanding.
How am I today?
On another night, Robert picks up a young woman who appears disoriented and drugged. He senses that something terrible has happened to her and takes her to the hospital to ensure she receives care. After leaving the hospital, he drives to the apartment where the men responsible are staying. At the apartment, Robert knocks on the door and speaks calmly to the men inside. He advises them to take responsibility for their actions. The leader of the group dismisses Robert's warning and locks the door. Robert takes a moment to observe the room and begins his work. The leader tries to attack, but Robert uses his own belongings against him, delivering precise and effective strikes. He moves through the room, breaking bones and neutralizing each man with careful, deliberate actions. When he gets to the last one, he tells him to call emergency services and confess to what they did to the girl. The man, trembling with fear, complies without resistance. Robert's tone is calm but firm, making it clear that he expects this to happen. Before leaving, Robert delivers a final warning and makes a remark about expecting a 5-star rating for his service. He walks out, leaving behind a scene of justice and fear. In Belgium, Mr. Calbert arrives home to a horrific scene. His wife is crying and visibly beaten. Before he can process what is happening, 3 men, Resnick, Ari, and Kovac, emerge from the shadows. Without hesitation, one of the men shoots Calbert's wife in the head, killing her instantly. They force Calbert to sit down, and Resnick shoves a gun into his mouth. Moments later, he pulls the trigger, ending Calbert's life. Back in the United States, Robert visits a bookstore to pick up a new book he had ordered. While there, he recognizes the clerk as Grace. Her daughter, who is with her, seems to recognize Robert as well, but Grace remains unaware that he was the one who reunited her with her child. Robert chooses to keep it that way, quietly observing as they go about their day. When Robert returns home, he finds Susan Plummer waiting for him. They share a warm and friendly dinner, catching up as old friends. Susan, however, forgot an important detail. It is Vivian's birthday, Robert's late wife. She gently suggests that Robert should spend more time outside and reconnect with the world. Later, Robert notices that Fatima, one of his neighbors, has had her garden vandalized. Her walls are sprayed with graffiti, and the sight disturbs Robert. He decides to start cleaning the walls himself. As he works, a young man named Miles Whitaker approaches him.
But nobody does, Miles. Ends up everybody.
Miles, who is an aspiring artist and often interacts with Robert, makes a comment about the graffiti and how it fits with the building. Robert responds with a subtle remark, pointing out the difference between what is supposed to happen and what actually does. Miles offers to help Robert remove the graffiti for a price. Robert agrees, appreciating Miles's willingness to help, even if the motivation is partly financial. The two begin working on cleaning up the vandalism. Meanwhile, Susan is investigating the brutal murder of the Calberts in Belgium. She speaks with her colleague, Dave York, as they review the crime scene. Together, they piece together clues and try to understand who could be behind such a violent act. After their work at the scene, Susan returns to her hotel room. Unbeknownst to her, two men are following her. They break into her room and attack her, shouting about money. Despite their aggression, Susan fights back with remarkable skill. She holds her ground for a while, but is eventually cornered in the bedroom. While this happens, Robert is watching Miles paint a wall. His phone rings, and it's Brian, Susan's husband, delivering devastating news. Susan has been murdered. Robert's calm demeanor cracks for a moment as he processes the loss of his close friend. Robert flies to Washington, D.C. to attend Susan's funeral. Afterward, he begins his own investigation into her death. He reviews hotel camera footage and crime scene photos, determined to uncover the truth. He traces the leads back to the two thugs who attacked Susan. The thugs are at their apartment, blasting music when they hear a phone ring. Confused, they check their phones, only to realize the sound is coming from an unknown device on the floor. The men pick up the phone and answer it. The moment they do, their radio explodes, killing them instantly. Outside, Resnick and his companions watch the explosion with satisfaction. They had planned it as a way to eliminate the men and cover their tracks. Robert reunites with Dave, who had thought he was dead. Together, they analyze the recent killings. Robert deduces that the thugs were not the masterminds, but loose ends that had to be silenced. He begins to connect Susan's murder to the Calbert case, suspecting that they are part of a larger and more sinister plot. Later, Robert observes Miles walking with two local gang members. Concerned about the situation, Robert decides to follow them discreetly. The group enters an apartment, and Robert quietly disables the guards stationed at the entrance. He confiscates their weapons before stepping inside. Inside the apartment, Miles is with the gang members and is listening to their plan. They promise to help him take revenge on the people who killed his brother. Robert interrupts the discussion, making his presence known. He makes it clear to Miles that associating with these men will only lead to trouble. His words leave no room for argument, and Miles follows him outside, leaving the gang members behind. Outside, Robert speaks firmly to Miles, explaining the reality of his situation. He reminds Miles that he has talent and potential, and warns him not to waste his life pursuing violence. Robert stresses that choices shape a person's future, and urges Miles to take advantage of the opportunities still available to him. The weight of Robert's words resonates with Miles, who begins to reflect on his path. Sometime later, Robert takes a job driving a passenger who claims to be heading to the airport. Robert notices something suspicious about the man and decides to test him. He intentionally takes a different route and mentions it. The man reacts by pulling out a knife and attempts to attack Robert. Robert responds swiftly. He drives erratically, causing the man to lose his balance inside the car. Using the chaos to his advantage, Robert repeatedly strikes the man with his elbow. The passenger tries to regain control and pulls out a gun, but Robert slams on the brakes, disarming him. Robert ends the confrontation decisively, shooting the man 3 times in the face. After the fight, Robert retrieves the man's phone and discovers coded information on it. He burns his car to eliminate any evidence and disposes of the body. Later, Robert brings the phone to Dave's house. He greets Dave's wife and daughters politely before they leave the room, allowing him to speak privately with Dave. Robert shows Dave the information from the phone. Together, they work to trace the source of the messages. The trail leads to another phone, which Robert discovers belongs to Dave. Dave reveals that after he and the other operatives believed him to be dead, they turned to illegal activities. Their operations escalated, and when Susan began uncovering the truth, Dave killed her to protect their secrets.
Government shut us down.
He then takes Robert outside, saying it is time to meet with Resnick, Ari, and Kovac. Dave insists that none of what has happened is personal, presenting it as business. Robert makes it clear that their choices and what they have become are their own responsibility. He points out how in an imperfect world, actions often carry no consequences, but that this situation is different. He declares his intention to kill all of them for murdering Susan and states that his only regret is being able to do it only once. Afterward, Robert approaches Dave's wife, who happens to be passing by, and requests a ride. He departs, but not before telling Dave he will see him again soon. Recognizing the danger, Robert moves Brian to a secure location. He fears Dave and his associates might consider Brian a loose end. Miles is painting the walls of Robert's apartment. Dave and Kovac arrive and plan to break in. At the same time, Miles is on a call with Robert. Realizing the imminent threat, Robert instructs Miles to hide behind a secret spot in the bookshelf. Miles obeys but begins to feel claustrophobic in the confined space. Dave nearly discovers Miles, but Robert calls him and provides false information about his own location. Dave takes the bait and redirects his focus, giving Miles some relief. However, before Miles can escape, Dave finds him and takes him hostage at gunpoint. Robert heads to his old hometown, now deserted because of an ongoing hurricane evacuation. Dave and his men spread out across the storm-battered town, determined to find him. The empty streets and worsening weather intensify their search. Kovac believes he spots Robert inside a shop. He enters cautiously, only to be ambushed. Robert kills him with a harpoon, striking with precision. Ari picks up the trail next, but Robert intercepts him before he can act. In a brutal encounter, Robert incapacitates Ari by slicing him fatally. Resnick continues the hunt, following Robert into another shop. Robert sets a trap, and a grenade explodes as Resnick enters. The explosion severely injures him, leaving no chance of survival. Dave positions himself at the top of a tower using a sniper rifle to track Robert. He contacts Robert and reveals that Miles is locked inside a car trunk. Dave threatens to kill Miles unless Robert surrenders. He fires warning shots, trying to force Robert into submission. Robert carefully calculates his response. When Dave prepares for his final shot, Robert shoots the tire of the car holding Miles. The sudden motion causes Dave to miss his target. Robert climbs to the top of the tower where Dave is waiting for him. They face off in a brutal fight. Both men are evenly matched, and the battle becomes intense. Dave manages to land a strike, injuring Robert. Despite the injury, Robert regains control of the fight. He gouges out one of Dave's eyes, leaving him in immense pain. Grabbing Dave's knife, Robert stabs him in the abdomen before slicing his neck from behind. Finally, Robert throws Dave off the tower, ending the confrontation. After dealing with Dave, Robert frees Miles from the car. He notices that Miles has been shot in the leg during the chaos. Without hesitation, Robert takes Miles to his old house, a place filled with memories of his past. He carefully treats Miles' wound, stopping the bleeding and ensuring he is stable. Inside the house, Robert takes a moment to reflect. Photographs from his time as a soldier are displayed, along with pictures of his late wife, Vivian. The memories add weight to everything he has done and endured to protect those he cares about. Back in the neighborhood, Fatima discovers that her garden has been fully restored. On one of the walls, a mural depicts scenes from her homeland, a tribute created by Miles. On the opposite wall, a message is painted expressing gratitude and hope. Miles is later seen riding a bus. He talks with a girl from his school, showing her a superhero drawing he is working on. The artwork is inspired by Robert, a reflection of the influence he has had on Miles's life. Sam is reunited with his long-lost sister, Magda, after Robert uses his connections to bring them back together. Later, Robert stands outside his old house. He gazes out at the vast ocean, lost in thought. In Sicily, an Italian city, a powerful underworld figure named Vitale arrives at his winery with his 10-year-old grandson. They are immediately disturbed by the horrifying sight of the gatekeeper's lifeless body at the entrance. Vitale instructs the boy to remain in the car, ensuring his safety, and then enters the winery with one of his men. Inside, Vitale is met with a chilling scene. The bodies of his men are scattered across the winery, all victims of a brutal attack. Moving further into the building, he finds some of his men alive but holding a figure at gunpoint. The man under their watch is none other than former CIA officer Robert McCall. Robert remains calm, even with 3 guns aimed directly at him. his focus shifts to a key hanging from Vitale's belt. Without hesitation, he demands the key, giving Vitale a 9-second ultimatum to comply. When Vitale refuses to hand it over, the countdown reaches its end. In a flurry of calculated movements, Robert dispatches Vitale and his remaining men with deadly precision. Retrieving the key from Vitale's body, Robert moves forward with his mission to recover money stolen during a cyber heist. After eliminating everyone inside, Robert exits the winery and notices Vitale's grandson still in the car. He warns the child to stay where he is and begins walking away. However, as he turns his back, the boy shoots him, the bullet striking him in the back. The child quickly flees the scene, leaving Robert collapsing in pain. Lying on the ground, Robert struggles with the agony of his wound. His thoughts grow darker, and he considers ending his own life to escape the suffering. When he tries to use his gun, he realizes it is out of bullets. After a moment of despair, he gathers the strength to rise and makes his way to a ferry, determined to return to the mainland. Despite his resolve, Robert's condition worsens. He continues to bleed heavily from the gunshot wound. While driving along the Amalfi coast, his strength gives out, and he is forced to pull over. He loses consciousness inside the car, his life hanging by a thread. A local man named Gio discovers Robert slumped over and unconscious. Recognizing the urgency, Gio rushes him to the town doctor, Enzo. At the clinic, Enzo removes the bullet from Robert's body, saving his life. He advises Gio to avoid telling anyone about the gunshot wound. Instead, he suggests they explain Robert was in an accident rather than disclosing the gunshot. The following day, Robert regains consciousness in Enzo's clinic. The doctor asks if the man they rescued is a good person. Robert answers honestly, admitting uncertainty. Enzo questions him further, asking if anyone is pursuing him. Robert shakes his head, giving a silent response to indicate no. Over the next few days, Robert remains at the clinic to recover. Despite his physical improvement, he becomes restless. Eventually, he leaves the house, using a cane that once belonged to Enzo's father to steady himself. Outside, Enzo tells him about their town, a small coastal place called Altamonte. Robert listens quietly and decides to explore. He notices that the town has fewer people than expected, yet there is an unusual number of CCTV cameras scattered around. The contrast intrigues him. After walking for some time, Robert visits a local restaurant. He orders tea, but the waitress mistakenly brings him coffee instead. She encourages him to try it, and he reluctantly agrees. Shortly after, Gio enters the restaurant with his young daughter. He is still in his police uniform. Gio joins Robert at the table and asks about his injury. Robert replies simply, stating that it was caused by an accident. Gio comments on the doctor's generosity and explains that the townspeople hold him in high regard. He mentions how most of them, including himself, owe their lives to the doctor who brought them into the world. Before leaving, Gio hands Robert a set of car keys. He informs him that the car is parked behind the police station and reassures him that he has not looked through the bags inside. Gio departs with his daughter, leaving Robert to reflect on the brief conversation. After returning from the restaurant, Robert makes an anonymous call to CIA agent Emma. He provides a tip about the winery and its involvement in illegal drug operations, which are being disguised as a legitimate business in Sicily. Emma is startled by the unexpected information and questions the identity of the caller. Robert identifies the organization as a financial operation of the CIA that manages illicit funds. Without giving her time to respond, he ends the call abruptly and destroys his phone. Emma immediately traces the location Robert mentioned. She gathers a team and prepares for a raid to investigate the winery. That night, Robert sits in silence, reflecting on his late friend Susan. He recalls her firm belief that he could never tolerate injustice, no matter the circumstances. The memory stirs feelings of guilt as he thinks about the moment he took her life. In the morning, Robert observes a local gang intimidating the townspeople. They are pressuring residents to hand over money. He soon learns that the gang is led by a man named Marco, who is also involved in smuggling. Robert grows increasingly disturbed by the situation. He notices that the townspeople are fully aware of the gang's activities, but remain passive. Marco visits his brother Vincent, who leads their gang with ruthless authority. Vincent is in the middle of threatening a couple, pressuring them to sell their house for his hotel project. After delivering their violent message, Vincent and his men leave, ensuring the couple understands the consequences of defiance. Meanwhile, Emma leads a raid on the winery with a team of CIA officers. They uncover evidence confirming Robert's suspicions. Hidden in the storeroom are millions in cash and stashes of phenethylline tablets, a potent illegal drug. The team also discovers numerous lifeless bodies scattered throughout the winery. Forensic analysis reveals that all the deaths were caused by a single individual. Fingerprints found on the weapons confirm this conclusion. The team checks the fingerprints against the database, but finds no match. This anomaly leads them to suspect that an active terrorist organization might be involved in the area. The lack of information about the perpetrator raises further questions within the CIA. Back in the small town, Robert speaks with Enzo and asks why the police were not involved when they first discovered him. Enzo explains his reasoning. He recalls asking Robert if he was a good or bad person when he treated him. Robert's honest response, admitting uncertainty, convinced Enzo that he was good. The doctor believes someone with bad intentions would have tried harder to defend their innocence. Enzo's trust causes Robert to reflect deeply on his past actions. That night, Marco's gang targets Enzo's clinic. They set it on fire as punishment for failing to pay protection money. Despite witnessing the destruction and violence, Robert remains composed, which intrigues Marco and captures his attention. Gio begins investigating the clinic fire and discovers evidence linking Marco's gang to the incident. He manages to identify the gang's car by its license plate number. In the weeks that follow, Robert makes a full recovery. His strength returns, but he stays quiet about his growing awareness of Marco and his men. Later, Robert is sitting in a restaurant when he notices Emma discreetly observing him from another table. She eventually approaches and joins him. Once seated, she asks him directly about the deaths at the winery. Robert responds with a casual demeanor, leaving her uncertain about his involvement. Emma remarks that she could not find any information about him in the database and vows to uncover his identity before leaving the restaurant. Marco learns that Gio is conducting an investigation into his activities. In retaliation, Marco goes to Gio's house and takes his family hostage. Gio returns home and is met with a brutal assault by Marco. Marco threatens him further by holding a gun near his daughter's head, warning him to stay out of their operations. After the terrifying encounter, Gio visits the doctor to have his injuries treated. He leaves with fresh bandages and tries to mask the pain and fear from the attack. Robert notices Gio leaving the clinic and asks the doctor about his injuries. The doctor initially dismisses it as an accident, but later admits the truth. He reveals that the local mafia is responsible and compares their grip on the town to an incurable disease. This revelation deepens Robert's resolve. Later, Robert meets with Emma outside a church. She provides new information about the gangsters killed at the winery. One of them had been on Interpol's most wanted list for over a decade due to his involvement in cybercrimes. Emma explains how Vitale targeted retired government officers, attacking them as soon as they received their funds. She also reveals that the terrorists had been using Vitale's property for smuggling operations. When Emma asks why Robert chose her for this mission, he avoids the question. Instead, he shifts the conversation, pointing out an inconsistency in the terrorists' operations. He questions why they would choose the most secure port for smuggling. Emma, intrigued by the question, departs to investigate further. That evening, Gio dines at a restaurant with his family. Marco and his gang enter and disrupt the peaceful atmosphere. Marco demands that Gio arrange a yacht for him, asserting his control. During the commotion, Marco notices Robert sitting nearby, quietly observing. Marco approaches Robert's table and issues a warning, emphasizing the consequences of meddling in their affairs. Robert remains composed and expresses his disdain for those who resort to threats. He states his growing attachment to the town and advises Marco to abandon his criminal activities. Marco dismisses the words with amusement, but the situation changes abruptly. Robert grabs Marco by the collar, forcing him to sit down. He commands Marco's men to leave the restaurant, and they comply. Robert takes Marco's gun before allowing him to leave unharmed. Gio watches the encounter in silence, astonished by Robert's calm yet decisive actions. Outside the restaurant, Marco waits for Robert, with an intention to retaliate. However, he never gets the chance. Robert eliminates Marco's men swiftly as they exit the restaurant. In the end, Marco himself is killed. His lifeless body is left propped against a car, serving as a grim message. The following morning, the police find drugs concealed in the bodies of the deceased gang members. This discovery links Marco's gang to the smuggling operation. Shortly after, Emma receives a call from her superior. She is told to turn on the television, where breaking news reports multiple bomb blasts in Rome. Emma begins to suspect that the terrorists might be hiding within the city. She proposes that their best chance of finding information lies with the drug dealers, as no one can access the ports without their involvement. She decides to meet with the dealers who are in custody, believing they control much of the illegal activity. Emma visits the police chief of Sicily and requests access to interview the jailed dealers. The chief grants her permission to speak with all but one. He warns her to avoid meeting a particular dealer, emphasizing the risks involved. Despite the warning, Emma secretly meets the forbidden dealer. She uses threats to extract the address of another key dealer, adding valuable information to her investigation. Emma and her team raid the addresses gathered from the interrogation. The raids raids result in the deaths of all the dealers. This escalation alarms the police chief, who meets with Vincent to urge him to halt all activities. He warns Vincent that the CIA is systematically eliminating the dealers. He also cautions that Emma is closing in and will eventually discover Vincent's role as the mastermind behind the operations. Vincent, overwhelmed by grief over his brother Marco's death, reacts violently. He slashes the police chief's hand in anger and demands that he identify who killed Marco. The confrontation deepens Vincent's determination to protect his criminal empire. Emma arranges to meet with the police chief at the hospital to discuss her findings. Before the meeting, she receives a call from Robert. He reveals that there are no terrorist organizations involved in the events. Instead, he explains that the crimes are orchestrated by local gangs operating within Sicily. During their conversation, Emma's car explodes, sending her flying. Robert's timely call saves her life, as she had left the car moments before the blast. Although she survives, Emma and several officers sustain injuries from the explosion. Vincent escalates the situation by taking Gio hostage. He threatens to execute him in front of the entire town unless Robert reveals himself. Robert steps forward and is willing to face Vincent. Before Vincent can carry out his threat, Enzo intervenes and fires a gun. This bold act inspires the townspeople, who begin recording the incident on their phones. Faced with public scrutiny and mounting pressure, Vincent and his gang retreat, vowing retaliation the following day. Later that night, Robert takes matters into his own hands. He infiltrates Vincent's residence and eliminates his bodyguards one by one. In a final confrontation, Robert forces Vincent to ingest a lethal dose of his own drugs. The poisoning ends Vincent's life, bringing his criminal operations to a close. With Emma's help, Robert ensures that the money confiscated from the winery is returned to the pension fund of an elderly couple. This act restores some justice to the victims of the gang's crimes. At Langley, Virginia, Emma receives a promotion for her instrumental role in dismantling the Altamonte drug trade. Among her belongings, she finds a note from Robert congratulating her. The note expresses how proud her mother would be of her achievements. It is revealed that Emma is the daughter of Susan, a longtime friend and trusted ally of Robert. With the mafia eradicated from Altamonte, peace returns to the small town. Robert joins the locals in celebrating their victory after their team wins a football tournament.